The desert wind howled across the training grounds like a restless spirit, carrying with it the weight of history and the promise of legend. In the world of military precision shooting, there are moments that define careers, reshape reputations, and challenge everything we think we know about human capability. This is the story of one such moment, when a single bullet traveled 4 kilometers through desert air and shattered not just a target, but every assumption about what was possible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as General Marcus Thornfield stepped out of his command vehicle, his weathered face set in the familiar expression of skeptical determination. At 58, Thornfield had seen enough military demonstrations to know the difference between genuine capability and elaborate showmanship. Today's exhibition would test the limits of both. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, delivered through official channels, but carrying an unofficial air of challenge. A new sniper training program claimed to have developed techniques that could extend accurate shooting ranges far beyond anything previously achieved. The documentation spoke of 4,000-meter shots with precision that bordered on the impossible. Thornfield had read similar claims before, usually followed by disappointing demonstrations and wasted military budgets. Standing beside his vehicle, Thornfield surveyed the expansive training facility that had been specially prepared for this demonstration. The range stretched out before him like a miniature landscape, complete with elevation changes, wind measurement stations, and targets positioned at increasingly distant intervals. The final target, barely visible even through high-powered optics, sat perched on a distant ridge at exactly 4,000 meters from the shooting position. The logistics alone were staggering. At that distance, a bullet would travel for several seconds through constantly shifting air currents. Temperature variations, humidity changes, and the Earth's rotation itself would all conspire to throw the projectile off course. Even the most advanced ballistic computers struggled to account for all the variables involved in such an extreme-range shot. Captain Sarah Mitchell approached the general with a crisp salute, her bearing reflecting years of military precision. As the base's head of training operations, she had been tasked with organizing this demonstration, though her own skepticism matched that of her commanding officer. She had personally verified the distance measurements 3 times, each reading confirming the seemingly impossible 4,000-meter range. The assembled crowd of military officials, weapons experts, and observers represented years of collective shooting experience. Among them stood Colonel James Hartford, a legendary marksman whose own long-range records had stood unchallenged for over a decade. His presence added weight to the proceedings, as did the collection of international observers who had traveled specifically to witness this demonstration. The morning briefing had outlined the technical specifications of the attempt. The rifle itself was a highly modified precision platform, customized with components that pushed the boundaries of available technology. The ammunition represented the pinnacle of ballistic engineering, with bullets manufactured to tolerances measured in fractions of thousandths of an inch. Even the shooting position had been constructed with mathematical precision, accounting for the slight slope of the terrain and the optimal angle for the extreme-range attempt. Weather conditions were being monitored continuously by a team of meteorologists who had set up a network of measurement stations along the entire length of the range. Wind speed and direction were recorded every 100 meters, creating a detailed map of the atmospheric conditions the bullet would encounter during its long journey to the target. Temperature readings were taken at multiple altitudes, as even slight thermal variations could significantly affect bullet trajectory over such distances. The shooting team itself was an enigma that added to the day's intrigue. Led by Dr. Elena Vasquez, a former Olympic shooting champion turned military consultant, the group represented an unusual combination of academic research and practical expertise. Dr. Vasquez had spent 5 years developing what she called environmental integration shooting, a methodology that treated long-range precision as a complex interaction between human skill, mechanical precision, and environmental awareness. What made this demonstration particularly controversial was Dr. Vasquez's claim that her techniques, could be taught to shooters regardless of their previous experience level. Traditional military thinking held that extreme-range shooting required years of specialized training and natural talent that couldn't be artificially developed. The implications of Dr. Vasquez's methods, if proven effective, would revolutionize military sniper training and potentially shift the balance of battlefield advantages. The target itself was a marvel of engineering designed specifically for this demonstration. Constructed from materials that would provide clear visual and electronic confirmation of any hit, it stood 18 inches square and featured multiple sensors that could detect even a glancing impact. High-speed cameras positioned around the target area would capture any bullet strike from multiple angles, eliminating any possibility of dispute about the results. As the morning progressed, preliminary demonstrations showcased the shooting team's capabilities at more conventional ranges. Shots at 1,000 meters were executed with mechanical precision, each bullet finding its mark with an accuracy that impressed even the most experienced observers. The 2,000-meter attempts continued this pattern of success, though the increased difficulty was evident in the longer calculations required before each shot. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as the range extended to 3,000 meters. At this distance, the target became almost invisible to the naked eye, requiring powerful optics even to confirm its location. The shooting team's preparation for each attempt became more elaborate, involving detailed atmospheric readings and complex ballistic calculations that took several minutes to complete. Yet even at this extreme range, their shots continued to find the target with remarkable consistency. General Thornfield found himself grudgingly impressed by what he was witnessing, though he maintained his skeptical reserve for the ultimate test that lay ahead. The 4,000-meter shot represented a quantum leap in difficulty from even the impressive 3,000-meter successes. At that range, the bullet would drop nearly 300 feet during its flight, requiring precise elevation calculations that bordered on the theoretical. The wind conditions throughout the day had been relatively stable, but even minor variations would be magnified enormously over the extreme range of the final shot. A wind shift of just 2 miles per hour at the midpoint of the bullet's trajectory could result in a miss of several feet at the target. The shooting team had been monitoring conditions continuously, waiting for the optimal moment to attempt their record-breaking shot. Dr. Vasquez moved among her team with the confidence of someone who had prepared for this moment through countless hours of calculation and practice. Her assistants managed an array of electronic equipment that seemed more appropriate for a scientific experiment than a military demonstration. Ballistic computers hummed quietly as they processed atmospheric data, while laser rangefinders continuously verified the exact distance to the target. The rifle selected for the ultimate attempt was a masterpiece of precision engineering. Every component had been selected and modified for maximum accuracy, from the custom-manufactured barrel to the precisely adjusted trigger mechanism. The optic system mounted on top represented the latest in long-range shooting technology, capable of providing clear target acquisition even at the extreme range they planned to attempt. As afternoon approached, the moment of truth drew nearer. The shooting team had completed their final preparations, and weather conditions had stabilized within acceptable parameters. General Thornfield took his position at the observation post, surrounded by the collection of military officials and technical experts who had gathered to witness this historic attempt. The first shooter stepped to the line, a young sergeant whose calm demeanor belied the enormous pressure of the moment. Under Dr. Vasquez's guidance, he began the elaborate process of preparing for the 4,000-meter shot. Wind readings were taken, atmospheric pressure was recorded, and temperature measurements were input into the ballistic computer. The calculations took nearly 10 minutes to complete, resulting in precise adjustments to the rifle's elevation and windage settings. The shot, when it finally came, was almost anticlimactic in its execution. A sharp crack echoed across the desert as the bullet began its long journey toward the distant target. For several seconds, the assembled observers waited in silence, scanning the far ridge through their optics for any sign of impact. The high-speed cameras captured every moment of the bullet's flight, but the human eye could detect no indication of success or failure. The electronic sensors at the target remained silent. After 30 seconds, it became clear that the first attempt had failed to find its mark. Dr. Vasquez nodded calmly, as if she had expected this result, and began preparing for the second attempt. The failure had provided valuable data about the actual conditions the bullet encountered during its flight, information that could be used to refine the calculations for subsequent shots. The second attempt followed a similar pattern, with even more detailed atmospheric measurements and refined ballistic calculations. The shooter's preparation was meticulous. Every aspect of his position and equipment checked and rechecked before the shot was fired. Yet again, the distant target remained untouched, and the electronic confirmation systems reported no impact. General Thornfield felt his initial skepticism returning as he watched the third and fourth attempts also fail to connect with the distant target. Each miss was followed by extensive analysis and recalculation, but the fundamental challenge remained unchanged. 4,000 meters was simply an extreme range that pushed beyond the practical limits of current shooting technology and human capability. The fifth, sixth, and seventh attempts continued the pattern of near misses and technical disappointment. Dr. Vasquez maintained her composure throughout the series of failures, treating each unsuccessful shot as a learning opportunity rather than a defeat. Her team continued their methodical approach, adjusting their calculations based on the growing database of information they were collecting about the actual conditions affecting bullet flight. By the time the eighth shot had also failed to find its mark, murmurs of disappointment were beginning to circulate among the observers. The impressive demonstrations at shorter ranges seemed to pale in comparison to the repeated failures at the ultimate distance. Several of the international observers began making notes that would undoubtedly result in skeptical reports to their respective commands. The ninth attempt was fired by a different team member, a corporal whose previous performance at shorter ranges had been exceptional. The change in shooters required new calculations and adjustments, as each individual's shooting technique introduced subtle variables into the ballistic equation. Despite the meticulous preparation, this shot also failed to connect with the distant target. General Thornfield's patience was wearing thin as he watched Dr. Vasquez prepare for the 10th attempt. The demonstration had consumed most of the day, and the repeated failures were beginning to make the entire exercise feel like an elaborate waste of military resources. He found himself questioning the wisdom of authorizing this demonstration and wondering how many more unsuccessful attempts he would be expected to observe. The 10th shot, fired after another lengthy series of calculations and adjustments, also missed its mark. The pattern of failure was becoming embarrassing, and General Thornfield could sense the growing restlessness among the assembled observers. Even Dr. Vasquez's team members seemed to be showing signs of frustration, though they maintained their professional demeanor throughout the proceedings. As preparations began for the 11th attempt, General Thornfield made a mental note to limit the demonstration to 12 total shots. Beyond that number, the exercise would transition from scientific inquiry to pointless persistence. The credibility of the entire program was at stake, and continued failures would only serve to reinforce the traditional skepticism surrounding extreme-range shooting claims. The 11th shot was fired with the same meticulous preparation that had characterized all the previous attempts. The bullet's crack echoed across the desert once again, followed by the familiar silence as observers waited for confirmation from the distant target. For the 11th time, the electronic sensors remained quiet, confirming another miss in what was becoming a disappointing series of failures. As Dr. Vasquez began preparing for what General Thornfield had decided would be the final attempt, an unexpected development changed the entire dynamic of the demonstration. A new team member stepped forward, someone who had remained in the background throughout the day's proceedings. The individual's arrival at the shooting line marked the beginning of a sequence of events that would transform this day from a disappointing failure into a moment of military history. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos stepped into the afternoon sunlight with a quiet confidence that immediately caught the attention of everyone present. At 29 years old, she carried herself with the precise bearing of someone accustomed to military discipline. Yet there was something different about her approach to the shooting line. Where the previous shooters had displayed nervous energy and intense concentration, Santos moved with an almost casual efficiency that seemed incongruous with the magnitude of the challenge ahead. Dr. Vasquez's introduction of Santos to the assembled observers was brief, but telling. Unlike the other team members who had extensive competitive shooting backgrounds or specialized military training, Santos had come to the precision shooting program through an unconventional path. Her original military specialty was communications and electronic warfare, fields that seemed to have little connection to long-range marksmanship. Yet something in her analytical approach to problem-solving had caught Dr. Vasquez's attention during a routine training evaluation. The transformation in Santos had been gradual but remarkable. Where traditional shooting instruction emphasized muscle memory and repetitive practice, Dr. Vasquez's environmental integration method focused on understanding the complex interactions between projectile, atmosphere, and target. Santos had proven exceptionally capable of processing the multiple variables involved in extreme-range shooting, treating each shot as a complex physics problem rather than a simple matter of aim and fire. General Thornfield watched with renewed interest as Santos began her preparation for the 12th and final shot attempt. Her approach differed markedly from the previous shooters, who had relied heavily on the electronic ballistic computers and atmospheric measuring equipment. Santos spent considerable time simply observing the environment, noting subtle visual cues that the instruments might miss. The wind patterns across the 4-kilometer range were particularly complex, with different layers of air moving at varying speeds and directions. Santos studied the movement of dust clouds, the behavior of vegetation at different distances, and even the heat shimmer rising from sun-warmed surfaces. Her observation process took nearly 20 minutes, during which she made handwritten notes in a small notebook rather than relying on the electronic systems. Dr. Vasquez explained to the observers that Santos represented the culmination of her research into environmental integration shooting. Traditional long-range shooting relied heavily on ballistic calculations and mechanical precision, but environmental integration emphasized the shooter's ability to read and adapt to constantly changing conditions. Santos had developed an almost intuitive understanding of how atmospheric conditions would affect bullet flight over extreme distances. The rifle Santos selected for her attempt was identical to those used by the previous shooters, but her adjustments to the optic system and shooting position were subtly different. She made microscopic changes to the rifle's cant and elevation, adjustments so small they were barely perceptible to observers, but represented precise compensations for factors that had escaped the attention of previous shooters. As Santos settled into her shooting position, the atmosphere around the range became noticeably more focused. Even the skeptical observers seemed to sense that something different was about to occur. Her breathing pattern was remarkably controlled, each inhalation and exhalation timed to coincide with the natural rhythm of wind conditions she had been monitoring throughout her extended observation period. The ballistic calculations Santos performed were a hybrid of electronic computation and manual calculation. She used the atmospheric data provided by the monitoring equipment, but supplemented it with her own observations and adjustments based on environmental factors that couldn't be easily quantified. Her final calculations included corrections for what she termed microenvironmental variations that existed between the measurement stations. Colonel Hartford, the legendary marksman observing from the sidelines, found himself particularly intrigued by Santos's methodology. Her approach challenged many of the fundamental assumptions about extreme-range shooting that had guided military sniper training for decades. Traditional doctrine emphasized consistency and repeatability, while Santos seemed to be embracing the inherent variability of environmental conditions. The wind measurement stations along the range showed conditions that were within acceptable parameters for extreme range shooting, but Santos had identified patterns and variations that weren't reflected in the electronic readings. Her handwritten notes included observations about thermal layers, pressure variations, and humidity gradients that could significantly affect bullet trajectory over the extended flight path to the 4,000-meter target. General Thornfield checked his watch and realized that Santos had been preparing for over 45 minutes. In traditional military training, such an extended preparation period would be considered excessive and impractical for operational conditions. However, the unique nature of this demonstration and the extreme range involved seemed to justify the methodical approach Santos was taking. The ammunition Santos selected for her attempt was identical to that used by previous shooters, but her inspection process was more thorough than anything the observers had witnessed. She examined each cartridge under magnification, checking for microscopic variations in bullet seating depth, case neck concentricity, and powder charge consistency. From a box of 50 rounds, she selected just 3 cartridges that met her exacting standards. Dr. Vasquez provided commentary for the observers as Santos continued her preparation, explaining how environmental integration shooting required a holistic understanding of the shooting system. Rather than treating the rifle, ammunition, and atmospheric conditions as separate variables, Santos had learned to perceive them as components of a complex, interconnected system that required constant monitoring and adjustment. The shooting position Santos had chosen was subtly different from the one used by previous shooters. While the designated shooting area provided multiple options for rifle placement, Santos had identified a specific location that offered optimal stability while taking advantage of natural windbreaks and thermal characteristics of the terrain. Her position placed her several meters to the left of where other shooters had fired from. As Santos finally settled into her final shooting position, the assembled observers fell silent with anticipation. The failures of the previous 11 attempts had created an atmosphere of skepticism, but Santos's methodical preparation had generated a palpable sense that something significant was about to occur. Even General Thornfield found himself leaning forward slightly, his attention focused entirely on the woman behind the rifle. The rifle Santos had positioned was a masterpiece of precision engineering, but in her hands it seemed to take on characteristics that transcended its mechanical specifications. Her grip was firm but not tense, her body position stable but not rigid. Every aspect of her interface with the weapon reflected the hundreds of hours she had spent developing what Dr. Vasquez called organic precision, the ability to become one with the shooting system rather than simply operating it. Through her rifle scope, Santos could see the distant target as a small geometric shape barely distinguishable from the surrounding terrain. At 4,000 meters, even the most powerful optics could not provide the kind of detailed target picture that shooters were accustomed to at conventional ranges. Success would require not just precise aiming, but an almost supernatural ability to place the bullet exactly where it needed to be despite the visual limitations. The wind conditions Santos had been monitoring showed a complex pattern of variations that changed subtly, but constantly throughout the afternoon. Rather than waiting for perfect conditions, she had learned to identify moments when the variations fell into predictable patterns that could be compensated for through careful calculation and timing. Such a moment was approaching, and Santos prepared to take advantage of it. Dr. Vasquez explained to the observers that Santos represented a new paradigm in long-range shooting that moved beyond traditional concepts of marksmanship. Environmental integration shooting treated each shot as a unique event that required real-time adaptation to constantly changing conditions. Santos had demonstrated an almost uncanny ability to process environmental data and make the split-second adjustments necessary for success at extreme ranges. The ballistic trajectory for a 4,000-meter shot was a complex curve that would carry the bullet nearly 300 feet above the line of sight before descending to the target. Throughout its flight time of approximately 6 seconds, the bullet would encounter varying wind conditions, temperature layers, and atmospheric pressure changes that would each contribute to its final point of impact. Santos had calculated not just the primary trajectory, but the complex interactions of all these variables. As Santos prepared to fire, her breathing pattern shifted to the final rhythm she would use for the shot. Environmental integration shooting emphasized the importance of timing the shot release to coincide with optimal atmospheric conditions, which required precise coordination between the shooter's physiological state and external environmental factors. Santos had identified a brief window of optimal conditions that would occur within the next 30 seconds. The observers watched in fascination as Santos made final microscopic adjustments to her rifle's position. These changes were so subtle as to be almost imperceptible, yet they represented critical compensations for environmental factors that she had identified through her extended observation period. Her shooting position had become a perfect synthesis of human skill, mechanical precision, and environmental awareness. General Thornfield found himself holding his breath as he watched Santos settle into her final shooting position. After 11 consecutive failures, the credibility of the entire demonstration rested on this single shot. If Santos missed, the program would be dismissed as an interesting but impractical academic exercise. If she succeeded, it would represent a fundamental breakthrough in military shooting capabilities. The moment of shot release, when it finally came, was marked by the same sharp crack that had characterized the previous 11 attempts. But something about this shot felt different to the assembled observers. Perhaps it was Santos's obvious confidence, or the methodical precision of her preparation, or simply the accumulated tension of the day's proceedings. Whatever the cause, this shot seemed to carry with it a sense of destiny that had been absent from the earlier attempts. The bullet began its long journey toward the distant target, traveling at over 2,800 feet per second, but still requiring several seconds to cover the 4,000-meter range. During its flight, it would climb nearly 300 feet above the line of sight, encounter multiple wind layers, and be affected by the Earth's rotation itself. Santos had calculated all these factors, but the ultimate test of her preparation would come only when the bullet reached its destination. For the first few seconds after the shot, the assembled observers maintained the same silent vigil that had characterized the previous 11 attempts. High-speed cameras captured every moment of the bullet's flight, while electronic sensors at the target waited to detect any impact. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as everyone present realized they were witnessing a moment that could make military history. 3 seconds after the shot, a slight shift in Santos's expression suggested she was tracking something through her rifle scope that wasn't visible to other observers. 4 seconds after the shot, Dr. Vasquez raised her binoculars with an intensity that hadn't been present during the previous attempts. 5 seconds after the shot, Colonel Hartford stepped forward slightly, his experienced eye detecting subtle signs that something significant was occurring. At precisely 5.7 seconds after the shot was fired, the electronic sensors at the 4,000-meter target registered a direct hit. The confirmation came not as a single electronic tone, but as a cascade of signals from multiple detection systems that had been triggered simultaneously. High-speed cameras captured the bullet's impact in perfect detail, showing the projectile striking within inches of the target center. The silence that followed the confirmation was more profound than anything that had preceded it. 11 failures had conditioned everyone present to expect disappointment, making the sudden success almost impossible to process immediately. General Thornfield stared at the electronic displays that confirmed the hit, reading and rereading the data to ensure he wasn't misinterpreting the results. Dr. Vasquez was the first to break the silence, her voice carrying a mixture of vindication and professional satisfaction as she announced the successful completion of the 4,000-meter shot. The assembled observers erupted into a combination of applause, amazed conversation, and urgent questions about the technical aspects of what they had just witnessed. Santos remained in her shooting position for several additional seconds, as if reluctant to break the connection with the moment that had just transformed her from an unknown communications specialist into a military shooting legend. When she finally stood and stepped back from the rifle, her expression reflected quiet satisfaction rather than triumphant celebration. The implications of Santos's successful shot extended far beyond the simple matter of hitting a distant target. Her success validated Dr. Vasquez's environmental integration shooting methodology and suggested that extreme-range shooting capabilities could be developed in personnel who lacked traditional sniper training. For military planners, this opened entirely new possibilities for battlefield applications and training programs. The immediate aftermath of Santos's successful shot was a whirlwind of activity that transformed the desert training range into something resembling a scientific conference. Military officials who had been preparing to write dismissive reports were suddenly demanding detailed technical explanations and requesting copies of all ballistic data. International observers who had traveled thousands of miles to witness what many expected to be an elaborate failure found themselves scrambling to contact their respective commands with news of a genuine breakthrough. General Thornfield's reaction was perhaps the most significant of all. A career military officer who had built his reputation on practical skepticism and measured judgment, he found himself confronting evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about what was possible in long-range shooting. The successful 4,000-meter shot wasn't just an impressive demonstration. It was a paradigm shift that could reshape military tactical doctrine and training protocols. Dr. Vasquez moved efficiently among the gathering crowd of officials and experts, fielding questions and providing technical explanations for what had just occurred. Her demeanor reflected years of preparation for this moment, as she had anticipated that success would bring intense scrutiny and demands for detailed documentation. Every aspect of the environmental integration shooting methodology would now be subjected to rigorous analysis and verification. Santos herself became the unlikely center of attention as military personnel and civilian experts sought to understand how someone with her background had achieved what seasoned snipers and competitive shooters had been unable to accomplish. Her responses to their questions revealed a depth of understanding about ballistics and environmental factors that belied her original training in communications and electronic warfare. The technical data from the successful shot was immediately secured and analyzed by the team of ballistic experts who had been monitoring the demonstration. High-speed camera footage showed the bullet's impact occurring at precisely 5.7 seconds after firing, confirming the extreme range and validating the ballistic calculations that had guided Santos's shot preparation. The bullet had struck within 4 inches of the target's center, accuracy that exceeded even optimistic projections for such an extreme range. Colonel Hartford approached Santos with the kind of professional respect typically reserved for fellow legends in the shooting community. His own long-range shooting records had been considered untouchable for over a decade, yet Santos had just demonstrated capabilities that made his achievements seem almost conventional by comparison. Their conversation revealed the technical sophistication behind what casual observers might have mistaken for an unlucky shot. The environmental conditions during Santos's successful attempt had been carefully documented by the network of monitoring stations positioned along the 4,000-meter range. Analysis revealed atmospheric variations that had been present throughout the day, but had been optimally aligned during the brief window when Santos chose to fire. Her ability to identify and exploit this convergence of favorable conditions was what separated her approach from the more conventional methods used by previous shooters. General Thornfield requested an immediate private briefing from Dr. Vasquez to understand the broader implications of what he had witnessed. The successful demonstration raised questions that extended far beyond simple marksmanship capabilities. If environmental integration shooting could be taught to personnel without traditional sniper backgrounds, it could potentially multiply the military's long-range shooting capacity without requiring the years of specialized training typically associated with such capabilities. The ballistic calculations that had guided Santos's successful shot were reviewed in detail by the assembled technical experts. Traditional long-range shooting relied heavily on ballistic tables and computer calculations that treated atmospheric conditions as relatively static variables. Santos's approach had incorporated real-time environmental adjustments that accounted for constantly changing conditions throughout the bullet's 6-second flight time. Media representatives who had been granted access to document the demonstration found themselves witness to a story far more significant than they had originally anticipated. What had been planned as routine coverage of a military training exercise had become documentation of a historic breakthrough in shooting technology and methodology. The implications for both military and civilian applications were immediately apparent to industry observers. International military attaches who had attended the demonstration as routine professional courtesy found themselves conducting urgent communications with their home countries. The successful 4,000-meter shot represented a capability that could significantly alter battlefield dynamics and strategic planning assumptions. Several countries immediately began inquiring about the possibility of accessing Dr. Vasquez's training methodology for their own military forces. Santos's background and training history became subjects of intense interest as military personnel sought to understand how someone without traditional sniper training had achieved such remarkable results. Her academic records revealed exceptional performance in mathematics and physics, subjects that proved crucial to understanding the complex ballistic calculations required for extreme-range shooting. Her analytical approach to problem-solving had been noted by instructors throughout her military career. Dr. Vasquez's research methodology came under immediate scrutiny as experts attempted to verify the scientific basis for environmental integration shooting. Her approach represented a departure from traditional shooting instruction that emphasized repetitive practice and muscle memory development. Instead, environmental integration focused on developing the shooter's ability to analyze and adapt to constantly changing conditions that affected bullet flight over extreme distances. The economic implications of the successful demonstration were immediately apparent to defense industry representatives who had attended the event. Traditional sniper training programs required extensive time and resources to develop personnel capable of extreme-range shooting. If Dr. Vasquez's methodology could achieve similar results with reduced training time and broader personnel selection criteria, it represented a potentially revolutionary advancement in military cost-effectiveness. General Thornfield's preliminary assessment of the demonstration's strategic significance was communicated to senior military leadership within hours of Santos's successful shot. The implications for force multiplication and tactical flexibility were substantial enough to warrant immediate high-level review and potential acceleration of the research program. The successful 4,000-meter shot had transformed an experimental training methodology into a potential game-changing military capability. The rifle and ammunition used for Santos's successful shot were immediately secured for detailed technical analysis. While the equipment was sophisticated, it was not beyond the reach of standard military procurement systems. This meant that the breakthrough represented by environmental integration shooting was not dependent on exotic technology that would be difficult to reproduce or deploy at scale. The methodology itself was the key innovation. Weather data from the day of the demonstration was compiled into a comprehensive atmosphere profile that documented every environmental variable that had affected the successful shot. This information would become part of the permanent record for environmental integration shooting research and would serve as a baseline for future training and development efforts. The complexity of the atmospheric calculations involved in the successful shot revealed the sophisticated level of environmental awareness required for extreme-range shooting. Santos's shot preparation methodology was documented in detail by observers who recognized its potential significance for future training programs. Her approach to environmental observation, ballistic calculation, and equipment adjustment represented a systematic methodology that could potentially be taught to other personnel. The implications for scaling up extreme-range shooting capabilities across military units were enormous. The target system that had registered Santos's successful hit was examined immediately after the demonstration to verify the accuracy of the electronic detection systems. Multiple measurement methods confirmed that the bullet had indeed struck within the designated target area at a verified distance of 4,000 meters. The precision of the hit, combined with the extreme range involved, established a new benchmark for military shooting capabilities. Dr. Vasquez's team immediately began planning follow-up demonstrations to verify that Santos's success was not an isolated occurrence. The credibility of environmental integration shooting methodology would ultimately depend on reproducible results achieved by multiple shooters under various conditions. Initial planning called for a series of demonstrations that would test the methodology's effectiveness across different ranges, environmental conditions, and personnel backgrounds. International interest in the demonstration results led to immediate inquiries about the possibility of licensing or sharing Dr. Vasquez's research with allied military forces. The strategic implications of environmental integration shooting were apparent to military planners worldwide, and several countries expressed interest in collaborative research and development programs. The successful demonstration had created diplomatic as well as military opportunities. General Thornfield's public statement following the demonstration was carefully crafted to acknowledge the significance of what had occurred while maintaining appropriate operational security considerations. His comments emphasized the potential for enhanced military capabilities while avoiding specific technical details that could compromise the strategic advantages represented by environmental integration shooting methodology. The academic and research communities responded immediately to news of the successful demonstration, with multiple universities and research institutions expressing interest in collaborative studies. The intersection of physics, meteorology, and ballistics represented by environmental integration shooting offered opportunities for multidisciplinary research that could advance understanding in multiple fields simultaneously. Santos found herself the subject of intense professional interest from military units and civilian organizations seeking to understand how her unique background had contributed to her exceptional shooting performance. Her story represented a new model for identifying and developing shooting talent that challenged traditional assumptions about the characteristics required for extreme-range marksmanship capabilities. The demonstration range itself became a subject of study as experts sought to understand how the extreme distance had been accurately measured and verified. The logistics of setting up a 4,000-meter shooting range with proper safety considerations and measurement accuracy represented a significant technical achievement in itself. Future demonstrations would require similar precision in range setup and environmental monitoring. Technology companies specializing in ballistic equipment and shooting accessories immediately began analyzing the implications of the successful demonstration for their product development programs. Environmental integration shooting represented potential new market opportunities for advanced measurement equipment, ballistic calculation systems, and specialized training programs. The commercial applications of Dr. Vasquez's research methodology were substantial. Military training commands across the United States began immediate review of their current sniper training programs to assess how environmental integration shooting principles could be incorporated into existing curricula. The potential for enhanced capabilities with reduced training time represented an attractive opportunity for improving military readiness while managing resource constraints. The psychological impact of Santos's success on the shooting community was immediate and profound. Her achievement challenged established hierarchies and assumptions about shooting talent, while opening new possibilities for personnel who had previously been excluded from consideration for extreme-range shooting roles. The demonstration had created a new model for what was possible in long-range marksmanship. As the initial excitement of the successful demonstration began to settle into systematic analysis and planning, the true magnitude of what had occurred became increasingly apparent. Santos's 4,000-meter shot was not simply an impressive individual achievement. It was evidence of a fundamental breakthrough in human shooting capabilities that could reshape military doctrine and training for decades to come. The weeks following Santos's historic shot transformed the quiet military research facility into the epicenter of a revolution in shooting technology and training methodology. Dr. Vasquez found herself at the helm of what had suddenly become one of the most closely watched military research programs in recent history. The successful 4,000-meter demonstration had triggered a cascade of interest from military commands, government agencies, and international allies that exceeded even her most optimistic projections. General Thornfield's initial skepticism had evolved into enthusiastic advocacy as he worked to secure expanded funding and resources for the environmental integration shooting program. His reputation for conservative judgment and practical assessment carried significant weight with senior military leadership, and his endorsement of Dr. Vasquez's methodology opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed. The transformation in his attitude represented a microcosm of the broader shift occurring throughout the military establishment. Santos herself faced the challenge of transitioning from relative anonymity to becoming the living symbol of a revolutionary advancement in military capabilities. Requests for interviews, technical briefings, and demonstration appearances flooded in from military units, research institutions, and media organizations worldwide. Her calendar filled with obligations that extended far beyond her original duties as a communications specialist, requiring careful management to balance public relations demands with continued research and development activities. The technical analysis of Santos's successful shot revealed layers of sophistication that had not been immediately apparent during the demonstration itself. Detailed examination of high-speed camera footage showed that her bullet had not only hit the target, but had done so with a precision that suggested her environmental calculations had been nearly perfect. The trajectory analysis indicated minimal deviation from the optimal flight path throughout the bullet's 6-second journey. Dr. Vasquez initiated an intensive program to verify the reproducibility of Santos's achievement under various conditions and with different shooters. The credibility of environmental integration shooting as a systematic methodology rather than an isolated success required demonstration that other personnel could be trained to achieve similar results. Initial attempts by experienced military shooters produced encouraging but inconsistent results, highlighting the complexity of transferring the methodology to personnel with different backgrounds and training. International attention focused intensely on the geopolitical implications of the successful demonstration. Military analysts worldwide recognized that environmental integration shooting could potentially shift the balance of power in various conflict scenarios, particularly in environments where extreme-range engagement capabilities provided significant tactical advantages. Several allied nations requested immediate access to training programs, while potential adversaries increased their own research efforts in response. The ballistic data from Santos's shot became the foundation for an intensive mathematical and physical analysis that engaged some of the most sophisticated research capabilities available to the military. Computer modeling of the shot revealed environmental interactions of extraordinary complexity that had been successfully navigated through Santos's intuitive understanding of atmospheric dynamics. The intersection of human capability and environmental science represented by her achievement opened new areas of research in multiple disciplines. Santos's background and training history were subjected to exhaustive analysis as researchers sought to identify the factors that had contributed to her exceptional performance. Her academic records revealed a pattern of analytical thinking and problem-solving ability that had been consistently noted throughout her educational and military career. However, nothing in her previous experience had directly prepared her for the environmental challenges of extreme-range shooting, suggesting that her success represented a unique convergence of natural ability and innovative training methodology. The media response to the successful demonstration extended far beyond military and technical publications to mainstream coverage that brought environmental integration shooting to public attention. Santos found herself featured in major magazines and television programs, representing both the human achievement and the technological advancement that had made the 4,000-meter shot possible. Her story resonated with audiences as an example of how innovative thinking could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Dr. Vasquez's research team expanded rapidly as additional personnel were assigned to accelerate the development and validation of environmental integration shooting methodology. The team included meteorologists, ballistics experts, cognitive scientists, and training specialists who worked together to understand and systematize the complex interactions between human performance and environmental conditions that enabled extreme-range shooting capabilities. General Thornfield established a classified working group to assess the strategic implications of widespread deployment of environmental integration shooting capabilities. The group's deliberations focused on four structure changes: training resource allocation and operational doctrine modifications that would maximize the military advantages represented by the new methodology. The potential for dramatic improvements in battlefield effectiveness had captured the attention of senior military leadership across multiple commands. Commercial applications of environmental integration shooting principles began attracting interest from civilian shooting sports organizations and law enforcement agencies. While the extreme ranges demonstrated by Santos exceeded practical requirements for most civilian applications, the underlying methodology offered potential improvements in shooting accuracy and environmental awareness that could benefit a broad range of users. Dr. Vasquez found herself fielding inquiries from organizations seeking to license or adapt her research for non-military applications. The rifle and equipment configuration used for Santos's successful shot became the template for standardized environmental integration shooting systems. Military procurement specialists worked with defense contractors to develop production versions of the specialized equipment that could be manufactured at scale for broader deployment. The goal was to combine the precision of the demonstration equipment with the durability and cost-effectiveness required for military field use. Santos's training regimen became the subject of intensive study as researchers attempted to identify the most efficient methods for developing environmental integration shooting capabilities in other personnel. Her approach to environmental observation, ballistic calculation, and shot execution was documented in exhaustive detail to create training materials that could transfer her knowledge and techniques to other shooters. The challenge lay in systematizing what appeared to be largely intuitive processes. International cooperation in environmental integration shooting research became a diplomatic priority as allied nations sought to ensure access to the breakthrough technology. Formal agreements were negotiated to share research data and training methodologies while maintaining appropriate security controls over sensitive technical information. The successful demonstration had created opportunities for enhanced military cooperation among traditional allies. The psychological aspects of Santos's achievement attracted attention from sports psychology and performance enhancement specialists. Her ability to maintain focus and execute complex calculations under the pressure of the demonstration suggested mental capabilities that could be developed through appropriate training methods. Research into the cognitive requirements for extreme-range shooting began exploring how mental preparation and stress management contributed to shooting performance. Field testing of environmental integration shooting methodology began at military training facilities worldwide as commands sought to validate the approach under diverse environmental conditions. Desert ranges, mountain training areas, and coastal facilities each presented unique atmospheric challenges that tested different aspects of the methodology. Initial results confirmed that environmental integration principles could be adapted to various geographic and climatic conditions. Santos's success inspired a new generation of military personnel to pursue advanced shooting training with the expectation that innovative methodologies could enable achievements previously considered impossible. Recruiting and retention in specialized shooting programs increased significantly as the demonstration showed that exceptional capabilities could be developed in personnel without traditional sniper backgrounds. The democratization of extreme-range shooting represented a fundamental shift in military human resource development. Academic research institutions began incorporating environmental integration shooting principles into advanced ballistics and atmospheric science curricula. The successful demonstration had created a new field of study that combined traditional ballistics with sophisticated environmental analysis and human performance optimization. Universities competed for research grants and partnerships that would allow them to contribute to the advancing understanding of extreme-range shooting capabilities. Technology development programs accelerated as defense contractors recognized the commercial potential of environmental integration shooting systems. Advanced ballistic computers, atmospheric monitoring equipment, and specialized optical systems were developed specifically to support the complex calculations and environmental awareness required for extreme-range shooting. The intersection of shooting sports and high technology created new market opportunities for innovative companies. The ethical implications of environmental integration shooting capabilities became subjects of discussion among military ethicists and international law specialists. The ability to engage targets at extreme ranges raised questions about battlefield engagement rules and the responsibilities of military personnel operating advanced weapon systems. Professional military education programs began incorporating discussion of these issues into their curricula. Santos's achievement was formally recognized through military awards and commendations that acknowledged both her individual excellence and her contribution to advancing military capabilities. However, the recognition extended beyond formal ceremonies to include her acceptance into the exclusive community of military personnel whose achievements had fundamentally changed their respective fields. Her name joined the ranks of innovators whose contributions had lasting impact on military doctrine and capabilities. Dr. Vasquez's research methodology began influencing other areas of military training beyond shooting as commands recognized the potential applications of environmental integration principles to various performance challenges. The approach of systematic environmental analysis combined with human performance optimization offered benefits for navigation, communication, and tactical operations in complex environments. Environmental integration became a broader concept with applications throughout military training and operations. The successful demonstration's impact on military budget allocation was immediate and significant as commands competed for resources to implement environmental integration shooting programs. The potential for enhanced capabilities with existing personnel represented an attractive return on investment that appealed to budget-conscious military leadership. Funding for advanced shooting research and training increased substantially across multiple military departments. International military exercises began incorporating environmental integration shooting demonstrations as allied forces sought to understand and potentially adopt the new methodology. These exercises provided opportunities for cross-cultural exchange of shooting techniques and environmental analysis methods while building stronger military relationships among participating nations. The demonstration had created new avenues for international military cooperation and technology sharing. As the immediate excitement of Santos's achievement settled into systematic development and implementation efforts, the long-term implications of environmental integration shooting continued to unfold. The successful 4,000-meter shot had proven that human capabilities could be extended far beyond traditional limitations through innovative training and environmental awareness, opening possibilities that would continue to reshape military training and operations for years to come. 2 years after the historic demonstration, the ripple effects of Santos's 4,000-meter shot had transformed not only military shooting doctrine, but had fundamentally altered the landscape of precision marksmanship worldwide. The environmental integration shooting methodology had evolved from an experimental program into a cornerstone of modern military training, with implementation programs active across multiple branches of service and allied military organizations around the globe. Dr. Vasquez had been promoted to director of the newly established Center for Environmental Integration Studies, a facility that had grown from her small research team into a world-class institution employing hundreds of specialists in fields ranging from atmospheric physics to human performance psychology. The center had become a pilgrimage destination for military personnel, civilian researchers, and international observers seeking to understand the revolutionary principles that had enabled Santos's achievement. Santos herself had transitioned from her original communications specialty into a new career as the military's premier instructor for environmental integration shooting. Her training programs had produced a new generation of precision shooters whose capabilities routinely exceeded what had been considered possible just a few years earlier. The waiting list for her courses extended over 18 months as military units worldwide competed for access to training that could multiply their effectiveness in long-range engagement scenarios. General Thornfield's advocacy for the program had earned him appointment as the military's senior advisor for advanced shooting systems, a position that allowed him to oversee the integration of environmental integration principles throughout military training curricula. His initial skepticism had become legendary within the military community as an example of how revolutionary advances could challenge even the most experienced professionals to reconsider fundamental assumptions about what was possible. The technological developments inspired by Santos's achievement had created an entirely new industry focused on environmental integration shooting systems. Advanced ballistic computers capable of real-time atmospheric analysis, sophisticated environmental monitoring equipment, and specialized optical systems had been developed to support the complex calculations required for extreme-range shooting. These innovations had applications that extended far beyond military use into fields such as meteorology, atmospheric research, and civilian shooting sports. International cooperation in environmental integration shooting research had strengthened military relationships among allied nations while creating new diplomatic challenges with potential adversaries. Formal agreements governed the sharing of research data and training methodologies, but the strategic advantages represented by the technology had also intensified global competition in advanced military capabilities. Several nations had established their own environmental integration research programs in response to the demonstrated effectiveness of the approach. The academic impact of environmental integration shooting had been equally profound, with major universities establishing specialized programs that combine ballistics, atmospheric science, and human performance research. The intersection of these disciplines had opened new areas of scientific inquiry that contributed to understanding in multiple fields. Graduate programs specifically focused on environmental integration principles had produced a new generation of researchers whose work continued to advance the boundaries of what was achievable in precision shooting. Santos's personal journey from communications specialist to international shooting expert had inspired countless military personnel to pursue advanced training opportunities they might never have considered. Her story demonstrated that exceptional capabilities could be developed in individuals whose backgrounds differed significantly from traditional expectations for specialized roles. Military human resource policies had been modified to encourage broader participation in advanced training programs based on analytical ability rather than conventional experience criteria. The operational deployment of environmental integration shooting capabilities had begun to influence battlefield dynamics in ways that validated the most optimistic projections from the original research. Military units equipped with environmental integration training and equipment had demonstrated engagement capabilities at ranges that provided significant tactical advantages while reducing risk to personnel. Combat effectiveness evaluations showed substantial improvements in mission success rates and force protection measures. Dr. Vasquez's research had expanded beyond shooting applications to encompass environmental integration principles for various military operations. Navigation in complex terrain, communication system optimization, and tactical planning all benefited from the systematic environmental analysis techniques that had been developed for extreme-range shooting. The methodology had become a broader framework for enhancing human performance in environmentally challenging situations. The commercial applications of environmental integration shooting had created unexpected opportunities in civilian markets, ranging from competitive shooting sports to law enforcement training. While civilian applications typically involved much shorter ranges than military operations, the underlying principles of environmental awareness and systematic preparation had proven valuable for improving accuracy and consistency across a wide range of shooting disciplines. Santos's training methodology had been refined through thousands of hours of instruction with personnel from diverse backgrounds and skill levels. The systematic approach she had developed could transform capable shooters into exceptional performers, while also enabling personnel with no previous shooting experience to achieve remarkable proficiency in relatively short periods. Her techniques had been documented in comprehensive training manuals that were considered essential references for advanced shooting instruction. The psychological research inspired by Santos's achievement had revealed new insights into human performance under pressure and the cognitive processes involved in complex environmental analysis. Sports psychology principles developed through environmental integration shooting research had found applications in other high-performance fields, including aviation, surgical training, and emergency response. The understanding of how humans could process and respond to complex environmental data had contributed to advances in human-machine interface design. International competition in environmental integration shooting capabilities had driven rapid advancement in the underlying science and technology. Nations that had initially dismissed the methodology as an isolated achievement had been forced to acknowledge its significance as reports of successful implementations accumulated from multiple sources. The competitive pressure had accelerated research and development efforts worldwide, leading to continuous improvements in training techniques and supporting technology. General Thornfield's strategic assessment of environmental integration shooting's impact on military doctrine had influenced force structure decisions and resource allocation across multiple commands. The ability to provide extreme-range precision engagement capabilities with relatively modest training investment had enabled new tactical approaches that maximize the effectiveness of available personnel. Military planners had incorporated environmental integration capabilities into strategic planning assumptions for various operational scenarios. The media attention that had initially focused on Santos's achievement had evolved into ongoing coverage of the broader implications of environmental integration shooting for military capabilities and international security. Documentary films, technical articles, and academic papers had examined various aspects of the revolutionary methodology, while public interest remained high in stories of individual achievement and technological advancement. Educational institutions had begun incorporating environmental integration principles into STEM curricula as examples of how interdisciplinary thinking could solve complex problems. Santos's story was frequently cited in programs designed to encourage students, particularly young women, to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. Her achievement demonstrated how innovative thinking and systematic preparation could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. The long-term implications of environmental integration shooting continued to unfold as new applications and improvements were developed through ongoing research and operational experience. Advanced training programs had produced shooters capable of consistently achieving accuracy at ranges that exceeded even Santos's historic demonstration. The methodology had proven to be not just a breakthrough, but a foundation for continued advancement in human shooting capabilities. Santos herself had become a sought-after speaker and consultant whose insights into environmental integration methodology were valued far beyond military applications. Her presentations at academic conferences, industry meetings, and professional development programs drew audiences interested in understanding how her approach to complex problem-solving could be applied to challenges in their own fields. She had become a symbol of how dedication and innovative thinking could achieve the seemingly impossible. Dr. Vasquez's research center had established partnerships with institutions worldwide to continue advancing the science of environmental integration across multiple disciplines. The center's work had contributed to improvements in weather prediction, atmospheric modeling, and ballistic analysis that benefited both military and civilian applications. The collaborative research network that had grown around environmental integration principles had become a model for interdisciplinary scientific cooperation. The training facilities developed for environmental integration shooting had become templates for advanced military training installations that emphasize systematic environmental analysis and human performance optimization. These facilities incorporated sophisticated environmental monitoring systems, advanced ballistic ranges, and specialized training equipment that allowed for precise measurement and improvement of shooting performance under various conditions. As Santos reflected on the transformation that had occurred since her historic shot, she recognized that the achievement had been more than a personal milestone. Her 4,000-meter shot had opened a door to human capabilities that many had believed were impossible to attain. The methodology that had enabled her success continued to inspire new generations of shooters, researchers, and innovators who pushed the boundaries of what humans could achieve through systematic preparation and environmental integration. The legacy of that desert afternoon, when General Thornfield shouted in amazement at the successful shot, continued to influence military training, scientific research, and human performance optimization years later. Santos's achievement had proven that the intersection of human capability, technological advancement, and environmental understanding could produce results that exceeded the most optimistic expectations. The shot that had initially seemed impossible had become the foundation for a revolution in precision marksmanship that continued to reshape military doctrine and human performance standards worldwide. In quiet moments, Santos sometimes returned to that shooting range where she had made history, reflecting on how a single moment of perfect execution had changed not only her own life, but had opened new possibilities for countless others. The desert wind still howled across the training grounds, but now it carried with it the knowledge that human limitations were not fixed boundaries, but challenges waiting to be overcome through innovation, dedication, and the systematic application of environmental integration principles that had made the impossible achievable.